The middle of July is the hottest month of the year in Alabama. I swore after 15 minutes of hiking. My clothes were so sticky with sweat, I could have wrung them and water would have dripped like a fountain. Well, not water, sweat, but it was great exercise and I loved being in the middle of nature. It was a shame Lilli couldn't come, but she told me to go. That, I needed it. And she was right. I did need it. After a whole month of trying to find the financial records of this or that client at the bank, and then analyzing our buyers' wallets, I was completely drained. I'd seen too many computer screens, too many digitalized numbers, and breathed in too much office air. I wanted a break. Nothing couldn't possibly make me feel as good as getting lost in the forest to do some camping and hiking. Now you see, normally, I wouldn't have gone alone. I would have brought my girlfriend and maybe another couple or two. However, this time it was different. When Lilli told me that she couldn't take off for the weekend, I decided to go alone. I could have invited someone else, but the idea of being completely alone surrounded by trees somehow just really seduced me. So I didn't call anyone to know if they wanted to join on this camping trip. And besides, I was only going to camp Friday and Saturday. It's not like I needed someone with me. Had I gone for a week, maybe I could survive 2 days on my own. And if I couldn't, the natural selection really would have done their job right. Anyway, I packed my stuff on Friday afternoon after I finished work and decided to get to a new spot. Now, someone at work told me about this mountainside that's very beautiful and easy to hike on. But they told me they couldn't hike too high because they were dragging the kids. But I was pretty sure that I could make it much higher on Saturday. I wouldn't have the time on Friday anyway because I was damn tired. And all I wanted to do was raise the tent, make a small fire for my hot dogs, and then have a couple beers and go to sleep. And that's exactly what I did. I hiked the mountainside, took in the fresh air, enjoyed the sound of dried twigs breaking under my weight with each step, and I sweat my life out. It was amazing already. I could tell a great weight was being lifted off my shoulders, despite all the heavy camping stuff I was carrying. I also picked up a few thicker sticks on my way up, because even with my starter tinder, I wanted to make sure I had enough to start a nice fire later. I just shoved them in my backpack side pocket and held them with the security straps on it. And once I had enough, it was just me and Mother Nature again. I kept hiking until I reached the spot my colleagues talked about. It was a sort of clearing with two big pointy stones sticking out of the ground toward the northeast. It was the ideal spot for camping, and a popular one, judging by the trash people left around. I sincerely hope this wasn't my colleagues' trash. And for the sake of our mutual understanding, I will keep believing that it wasn't. I raised my tent near the rocks as the sun slowly started to go down, and then started a fire with the dried wood I'd pick up along the way, and some of the starter sticks that I had in my backpack. After that, it was beer and hot dog time. Since the day had been so hot, I didn't think the night would get that much fresher. There was a sort of heavy humidity hanging in the air, even after the sun had set. Sitting by the fire didn't help to take the heat off either, and since a shower was probably out of the question, all I could do was use the baby wipes I'd brought to at least clean myself a little. Considering how much I sweat that day, I couldn't just go to bed and ignore it. I also took care of burning all my trash before using dirt to extinguish the fire. Once I was sure the fire had been suffocated properly, I finished my second beer and went to bed. And that was enough for the first night. My backpack would be a little less heavy to carry tomorrow, and I could probably make it higher on the mountainside. I went inside my tent and played on my phone a little, and I sent my girlfriend a goodnight text. I was surprised to have signal, but I supposed I wasn't that high on the mountain yet, and I knew there was a good chance I would lose it the next day. Once I turned off my phone, though, I fell asleep like a log. I bet nothing could have woke me up if it tried. The sunrise woke me up 8 hours later after it crossed the tree line, and I could feel that dull ache in all my muscles from the previous day's hiking. Honestly, it felt great. I'd rather have these pains than lower back pains from sitting all day in front of my computer. The morning was also a lot fresher, so when I got out of the tent to do my morning's business, I was pleasantly surprised when the long grass covered in morning dew brushed against my leg. Felt nice. That fresh, humid scent was also very pleasing and just did a wonder on my mood. I whistled on my way back to the tent and whistled while I started another fire to cook my bacon and eggs. Now, I hated building up that small outdoor barbecue grill thing with the little canister of propane, but it was either that or hot dogs at all meals. While I do love me a good hot dog, I wouldn't eat it for breakfast. Besides, I needed real proteins and sustenance to hike higher. Again, I burned my trash, made sure the fire was put out, packed my stuff, and started hiking again. It was about noon when I started my ascension. Today was a lot less hot than the previous day. I was even graced with a soft breeze. The conditions for the climb were absolutely perfect. Of course, I didn't forget to put orange tape on my way up, so that I wouldn't get lost climbing down. The trail stopped at the campsite after all, and I took a pause every 30 to 45 minutes to drink some water. And after about 3 hours of climbing, I could see the top of the mountainside. I wondered what I would find there. A few minutes later, I could see a cabin in the woods, not too far from where I was hiking. I didn't pay too much attention to it, admittedly. Just another park ranger's spot or a hunter's cabin. Either way, I wanted to make it to the top, so I just kept going. The more I climbed, the colder it was getting. I supposed it was normal altitude and all, but something was stirring inside me, like an instinct telling me to turn back. But I was so close to the top, I just ignored it. Sweat rolled down the length of my spine, the cold beads soaking the waistline elastic of my sweatpants. I swallowed thickly and drank some water before turning slowly on myself to admire the landscape. And that's when I saw it. White and blue, half broken and filled with what looked like mud from my distance. I snorted, but all my senses were on alert. I could see the kitty ducks drawn on the side as a design, and I truly wondered what a kiddie pool was doing in the middle of the woods, close to a mountaintop. Now I should have ignored it, or went down, but I was compelled, and so I walked over to that abandoned kiddie pool. My curiosity to understand what it was doing up there overwhelmed my sense of danger. But by God, when I reached the pool, the danger alarms were blaring and froze every muscle in my body. I remained anchored on my spot as I watched in horror what that little kiddie pool was filled with. Limbs, skulls, flies, and guts, all in various states of decay. From the size of that ankle over there, I guessed that the victim wasn't very old either. When I finally got out of my shock, I turned around, and my eggs and bacon met with the forest ground. Now at that point, I hobbled to a tree and leaned against it as I searched for my cell phone. As expected, there wasn't a single bar to help me with. I had no choice. I had to go back down and call the police. And then I heard a twig break about 20 or 25 feet away from me, and the amplified sound of a dog sniffing something. I stood completely still, and I even stopped breathing. After a few more sniffs, whatever made that noise returned to their meal. I couldn't believe I hadn't heard that noise before that, but I was probably too focused on what the hell was in the kiddie pool. I got a hunting knife out of my backpack and took it off my shoulders. If I needed to run, I needn't be stopped by the weight of my backpack. I swallowed thickly regretting that I didn't have my gun with me. I walked slowly toward the place where I thought the sniffing sound came from, and I saw it. There was a guy bent over a mass of flesh, eating loudly. I'd never heard such a disgusting sound in my life. He was wearing what I believed to be a park ranger coat, but there was quite the number of tears in it. His jeans were also stained with dirt and caked in what I hoped would be mud. But most of all was the sound. I heard the ripping, peeling, the disgusting squelching noise he made as he ate, and started to wonder how the hell someone could make such a noise. Each bite had my heart skipping a beat and threatened my fragile stomach with cramps. I wanted to run, but if that guy was the reason there was a kiddie pool full of limbs and blood, I wanted a good look at his face to be able to identify him. Plus, I was no kid. I was in good health. I had a knife. And, well, he didn't look armed. I shouldn't have tried to play the hero, though. I couldn't see his face because he was bent so well that all I could see was the back of his neck. And I remember thinking about how weird his skin looked. The back of his neck was sort of purplish and veiny, like someone who held their breath for too long. Holding my hunting knife as strongly as I could, I stopped when I was about 10 feet away from him. The munching sound made my heart rise in my throat, and I kind of expected him to be munching on one of those rotting limbs I found, or by the size of it, a torso. "Hey," I called to him. I wanted him to turn around and face me. And then I was prepared to take off and run or fight for my life. I could hear my heart beat loudly against my eardrums, deafening any sounds around us. The munching stopped, and it sniffed again. A weird, throaty noise escaped him, and I heard some liquid splash into the ground as it slowly turned around. My blood turned to ice, and it felt like millions of ants crawling up my spine and bit at the very marrow of my bones. In an attempt to comprehend what exactly my eyes were seeing, my brain flicked on and off relentlessly. I heard myself scream before I actually screamed, and I turned around and started running because my life depended on it. And I heard a throaty raptor noise and millions of teeth clicking together before running steps followed behind me. It was a face with no face. A face with nothing but teeth and skin so heavily tinted purple, I didn't even know how I could think this thing was human in the first place. It had arms and legs, but it didn't have a head. It had nothing but a mouth. A gigantic mouth full of teeth that would put Sarlacc, the creature in the sand in the Return of the Jedi, to shame. I think I even kept screaming for a couple of minutes as I ran until I finally got it out of my system, and then my survival instincts finally kicked in and told me to knock it off. And I didn't know how long I ran, but in the distance, I could see that cabin. It meant I was getting closer to where there were signal bars and I could call someone. A part of me wanted to keep on going until I reached the camping site, but my heart was in my throat, and I didn't know if that thing was still following me. And that is, until I heard that demonic, distorted scream and clicks in the distance. I had an advantage, but I was running out of fumes and adrenaline. So, I dashed toward the cabin. That was a big mistake. As soon as I entered the cabin, I heard the telltale sound of the beast's steps, maybe 30 feet away. It was running straight to this cabin, and unfortunately, there was nothing to block the doors and windows with. As I started panicking, I looked up for an attic trap, but there was none. There was also a horrid smell in that cabin, but I didn't have time to think about where it could come from. In my panic, I stared down and saw a trap that led into the ground. I heard scratching on the cabin deck, and I knew I had no choice. I entered the trap into the ground, and it turned out to be a cave. I closed the door as the beast broke in through the cabin doors, and I could hear its heavy steps on the floor above my head. I held my breath. The smell down here was pungent, fetid, and I wanted to throw up again. And if it wasn't from my heart beating so fast and my life being in danger, I probably would have. I couldn't see shit in front of me, but I heard a small moan on my left. It wasn't human, though. No humans moaned like that. It sounded scratchy. And then I heard the creature scream above me and the scratchy moan on my left, and I realized I couldn't hold my breath any longer. I was lucky enough because at the same time, I heard the beast run out into the woods and scream its powerful lungs out. I swallowed heavily as I reached for the Zippo in my pocket, and when I lit the Zippo, I had to bite on the crook of my elbow to stop from screaming. Beneath the cabin, there was a ton of larvae feeding on human and animal remains. Larvae with faces full of teeth and little antennas protruding from their head. I climbed up as fast as I could, and I ran the hell out of that cabin, still holding tight onto my hunting knife. I ran until my lungs threatened to explode, even further down than the campsite, and I even got in my car, started the engine, and I drove for at least 20 minutes before stopping at a gas station to call the police. Now the story made the news. They talked about the mountain of corpses under that cabin, and Kiddie Pool. But nowhere did they mention the creature.